This is our presentation on our country profile project of Saudi Arabia.
So to first start off with the history, we're going to go back to 570 AD, where the Prophet Muhammad came to the Mecca tribe, and which is today the Hajj or the Mecca, where he was today buried. And then fast forward to 1902, where Abdul Aziz bin Saud, he joined all the tribes together and conquered, which is today's capital of Riyadh. And then in the 1920s, he later conquered Hijaz and Najd, and also defeated the Ikhwan. The Ikhwan, they are an Arabic term for the Brotherhood, and they were trying to stop Abdul Aziz to create a more modernized kingdom. Later on, Saudi Arabia finally came into formation, which is their Independence Day. And in 1934, which is the first Saudi and Yemeni war, which is a big conflict with the border. 1938, Saudi Arabia finally discovered they had oil. 1979, fast forward until then, the extremist group or the militia group took over the Grand Mosque. Later, the National Army of Saudi Arabia regained it 10 days later. 1981, Saudi Arabia was the first one to found the Gulf Cooperation Council. Going to the Gulf War I, which is with Saudi Arabia and Iraq and other foreign countries. And then later on, they finally had 20 women attend the Consultative Council, and they were all women of the Saudi Arabian, they were issued government ID cards. And this is a big time for Saudi Arabia because now they're becoming more quote unquote westernized, a little bit modern, because now they're being more lenient with women's rights. Now they finally had their first municipal election in 2005. They had their first women athletes in the Olympics in 2012. Later the following year, they had 30 women sworn into the Shura Council. The Saudi and Yemeni war rise back up in 2015, and 20 women were elected from the municipal nominations. Later in 2017, women are chief executives for the Saudi Arabian National Stock Exchange. And today, in 2020, they're now filling the gender pay gap, and they're trying to create a law that has all women and men being paid equal under whatever job they have.
So in Saudi Arabia's education, there is a great movement to try and increase education efforts and increase the actual adherence to their schooling. And this has been pretty effective because already literacy rates have increased by 30% since the 1990s. And there is a bit of a disparity in literacy between the elderly population and the younger generations, because the group of 15 to 24-year-olds, almost the entire population, 99% of them are literate, whereas only 62% of people aged 65 and older are literate. So that's a great gap that they're trying to close, but it is difficult in the older generations. And in the older generation, there is a significant gap between literacy in men and women, whereas women are 31% less literate than the males.
Okay, so the culture of Saudi Arabia. So the government of Saudi Arabia is an absolute monarchy, and the major religion of the country is Islam, and most of the citizens follow the branch known as Sunni branch. So other religious affiliations are the Shia branch, which is the second major branch of Islam, Catholicism, like Roman Catholicism, other forms of Christianity, and Hinduism at like a much lower percentage. So Saudi Arabia has a very conservative and traditional culture, and their customs and laws are influenced by a conservative interpretation of Islam. So general customs shared by most Saudis include a strong moral code, a sense of duty to their community, protectiveness of their family, and personal honor and loyalty. So they're a collectivist culture, and they have a strong social norm of separation of the genders. So there's current tensions between like the traditional aspect of their culture and like the modernity, because there's a recent cultural shift towards modernization, especially in the younger generation. And there's also various tribes that follow their own customs and traditions, because it's not a monolith of a country. There's all sorts of smaller tribes that exist among the country. So it's also the birthplace of the Prophet Muhammad and the home of Mecca, which is a holy land for Muslims. So this makes the country like the de facto leader of the Sunni branch in the Muslim world. And Mecca tourism is a major part of Saudi history, society, and global influence.
So in terms of the economy, Saudi Arabia does extremely well with an expected 2.5% growth annually. There are obviously laws that prohibited women from joining the workforce, but as we saw, there is a great movement to close the gap between genders. So there is no longer that law barring the women from joining. So a great population is now joining the workforce. Still, only 15% of the total workforce is composed of women, so there is still a ways to go there. In addition to that, there is a great disparity in the wages between people. As we saw, this is a monarchy, so sometimes in those populations, there can be a disparity between the royals and those who have long histories of great economic status, and those who are in poverty remain there, even though that they are trying to get jobs and things like that. So the unemployment rate is 12.9%, and this is composed of a lot of different factors. There are a great amount of foreign workers in the nation, with about 3 million out of the total 11 million workers being composed of immigrants. So there is a disparity to be closed there. The healthcare system is being reformed, and it is trying to become standardized and more privatized in order to give the hospitals more autonomy to hire new professionals, secure healthcare providers, and effectively plan for the future. As the hospital regulations are more privatized, they can make more decisions on how to conduct themselves and try and improve the overall quality of the healthcare system. This is also alongside an improvement in insurance, because they are developing a new system with a gradual development. It goes into 3 phases, starting with the private sector, where employers give their employees insurance, and then the government section is giving insurance, followed by health insurance is applied to all groups. So right now they're in phase 1 and still working on improvements. And then here you can see that this is just a demographic to show that healthcare system is constantly growing in Saudi Arabia and is doing well. And this rapid growth is at a steady pace. So as more chronic diseases are occurring in the country, you can see that the hospital beds are managing to stay on par with the population at a steady rate of 2.2. So right now they're capable of maintaining their patients, but it is definitely an ongoing effort to maintain the population growth alongside the hospital growth. So it is an entire system overhaul.
So as far as the Millennial Development Goals that Saudi Arabia has accomplished, they had significant success in meeting all the targets by the 2015 deadline. One of the major areas that was lacking included gender equality and women empowerment. Progress toward this by giving women more rights and positions of power within the nation. For their sustainable development goals, they have made progress towards 6 of the 17 major goals, which include clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, life on land, and partnerships for the goals.
In terms of determinants of health, Saudi Arabia qualifies according to the World Bank income as a high-income country. So as expected, they have a high life expectancy at birth of 72.3 for men and 76 for women. Infant mortality rate, neonatal mortality rate, and under 5 mortality rate, as well as maternal mortality rate, are all pretty low, as you can see there. As far as epidemiology, The burden of disease in Saudi Arabia, as is the case with most high-income countries, falls mostly on non-communicable diseases at 78%, with 12.6% communicable diseases and 9.4% injuries. The leading cause of death, as it is in America, is cardiovascular disease. And the reason that communicable diseases are not a huge concern is that primary health care is available even in most rural areas. Diet is one of the leading issues in Saudi Arabia. Poor diet accounts for 10.4% of dailies and 22.1% of deaths in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. High BMI is the leading contributing factor for dailies in KSA. And this is a population period of Saudi Arabia. As you can see, it's not a perfectly steep pyramid, which is an indicator of the fact that non-communicable diseases are typically what is killing people in countries like this.
Now we're going to talk about the top 10 ethics issues of Saudi Arabia. This is based on a study that was conducted there. So coming in at number 1 was patients' rights. They do have the manual guide for medical practitioners, but it is not yet finished, so it often falls on hospitals to develop the patient's rights. Number 2 was equity of access to resources. There are 3 main cities in Saudi Arabia, so most of the healthcare does fall in those, but there are other places, but with those 3 main cities, it can still contribute to unequal access. Confidentiality of patient information is another huge issue. There are no clear policies. Again, this falls with the physician, and there is an increase in the suing of doctors. So this is perhaps preventative so that doctors cannot be sued if there are clear policies on that confidentiality. Number 4 is patient safety. Physical, emotional, and social safety all fall under that. They are making efforts, as you can see with this Patient Safety Forum from 2019, so they are working towards improving that goal. Number 5, conflict of interest. There are no clear policies being made, but one of the bigger issues is between healthcare teams and other companies, but also doctors practicing in both public and private hospitals. And 6 through 10 of those top 10 ethics issues are ethics of privatization, which we touched on. They are moving towards new insurance policies and privatization of hospitals. Informed consent, that becomes an issue with the additional foreign workers that they have. So there's a lack of Arabic speaking healthcare workers. Dealing with the opposite sex goes back to the Islam religion. Male doctors cannot care for female patients and vice versa. And then we move to beginning and end of life, and then ethics of the healthcare team wrap up those top 10 ethics issues.
So as we saw, Saudi Arabia is a rapidly developing healthcare system. So they are constantly changing the face of their public health perspective, and it is very fascinating to see how the population growth and different policy changes will affect them in the future. Thank you.